Yes, I'm here to tell you, you did read that title correctly. You don't need to rub your eyes. You don't need to look at it twice. I think what better way to wrap off 2020 than to talk about the Phoenix Suns being championship contenders. I think that just sums up the year in itself, that now the Phoenix Suns can genuinely be called championship contenders. Now, I'm not going to go out and say they're championship favorites because I'm not crazy and I'd rather not lose all my credibility after only being in this game for a few months. But to say they're contenders, I think that's far from crazy. I don't think that's even outlandish at this point because I think they're clearly a top 10 team in the league at the moment. And when I look at their team, everything to me suggests it's going to translate to the playoffs, and we're going to talk about that. But I think what better place to start, well, than dropping a like on the video and subscribing to the channel, because that would be much appreciated and it really does help out a lot. So doing that would be a good place to start as well. But apart from doing that, personally, I don't think a better place to start when talking about the Suns and their emergence as now a championship contender, a genuine threat in the West, than talking about Cameron Johnson, because I think it kind of epitomizes everything about the Suns over the last couple of years, how they've gone from a laughingstock just following the 2019 draft. Basically, Suns fans and fans of 29 other teams were ridiculing them for taking a 23-year-old earlier in the draft than expected. This is probably my pet peeve when it comes to just NBA in general. NBA fandom, NBA reactions, anything. Draftees and people making conclusions before they even see them on the court. Normally people who have watched 3-minute highlight videos of them playing college ball and saw one mock draft where they were projected to go 25th and ended up going 11th. And then their conclusion is, that's a terrible pick. Disregarding everything, how they conducted themselves in interviews, how they did in pre-workouts, just how they played throughout the whole season in college, all of these things. But anyways, that's a whole tangent that I don't need to get into, but I think it just epitomizes the Suns. They've gone from being laughed at just last year for drafting Cam Johnson with the 11th overall pick to now him being one of the most productive bench players in the NBA to start the season, and a key piece to why this team is performing so well. Not just Cam Johnson, but Cam Payne. Let's take it back to last year. Cam Payne and Cam Johnson are now two of the biggest pieces off the bench for a Phoenix Suns team that are now a championship contender. There's a lot of crazy things that you could have said heading into 2020 that would have turned out to be true, but this is probably up the top of the list, that you would have Cam Johnson and Cam Payne as the ones who punch off the bench for the Phoenix Suns, who are now a championship contender. That's 2020 and that's the Phoenix Suns. And we're just getting started when talking about this team because there's so much to cover, because this team is so good, so deep, so versatile, so well coached. They've got the leadership, they've got the star power, and they've obviously got the role players. Two of them I just mentioned. Cam Payne, we won't just brush over him because over the last couple of games he's amassed 13 assists and 0 turnovers. And when you just take it back to his bubble performance, 8 games, which some people thought might have been a fluke, it might have just been the magic of the bubble. It doesn't seem to be that way at all, because he's continued how he finished in the bubble, and he's just someone who plays to his strengths. He gets to the rim occasionally, he makes the right passes, he doesn't try to do anything too flashy, he'll hit the open three-pointer when it's available, he'll move the ball, he'll just take over the second unit and do everything right, and I think Cam Payne deserves a bit of credit. So instead of starting with Devin Booker and Chris Paul like a lot of people would when talking about the Suns, I wanted to talk about the two Cams because I think they both epitomize how this franchise have turned themselves around in the space of a year, and how these two have gone from a laughingstock just last year to now one of the most dangerous bench combos in the league. That just sums it up, and I think that's a good place to start. But let's move on to some more star power, and let's talk about Deandre Aiden. I more want to talk about his defense because there's been this narrative pretty much since he entered the league that he's a bad defender. Well, to start his career, yeah, he wasn't a great defender, but last year he was a good defender. I made a video on the Suns, and a lot of that was detailing how Deandre Aiden is one of the more versatile bigs in the league. He's someone that can guard players on the perimeter and inside, similar to an Anthony Davis. He's not at that level. Don't even get me twisted for saying that. But when you look at the statistics and when you look at the film, that's the kind of player that you can see the potential Ayton has there. He might never be the defender Anthony Davis is because he's a very, very good defender. But that's the kind of versatility he has shown, and the lazy narrative that he's a bad defender. I don't know if anyone is still running with that narrative. Probably not, because people have probably actually seen the Suns play now. I think last year they just didn't watch the Suns, and what they were saying was Devin Booker's a good scorer who needs more help, Deandre Aiden can't defend, and all he is a walking double-double. That's probably how it went, but now they've watched him play and they say he's a versatile defender who can get stops on Zion, or he can bang inside with Steven Adams. He's then got an offensive game. What I love about Aiden is he just rolls hard to the rim. Some centers don't roll hard to the rim. They just kind of sit there. They might go to the mid-range spot. They might pop out. It's just not challenging the defense as much as you can if you set a hard screen up at the three-point line and then roll to the rim really hard. It opens up the floor, not just for yourself, but for others, for your point guard, for your shooters around you, because it just means a lot of those eyes go fixated straight onto the big man rolling hard to the rim because they know if no one picks him up, then he's going to get an easy bucket. And sometimes that can lead to miscommunications, which leads to open threes. And their ball movement is nothing short of special, the Suns at the moment. They've clearly bought into this culture that Monty Williams has installed, and it helps when Chris Paul is obviously leading the line, one of the best playmakers and passers of all time. But it's not just Chris Paul, it's the Suns in general. They had the most assists last year. They continued to move the ball, and it's really summed up by Devin Booker and Chris Paul shooting 13 shots last game. 13 field goals, not each, combined. So 6.5 field goals each for two of the best offensive players in the entire NBA. If that doesn't set a precedent to the rest of your team, that if your star players, superstars, are willing to sacrifice their shots for the betterment of the team and to make sure that the offense continues to move smoothly and that everyone gets touches and everyone gets shots, then nothing else will set a precedent. That sets an absolute precedent, but it's deeper than that as well. It comes from your wings consistently cutting to the rim. Mikael Bridges, Cam Johnson, Jay Crowder. 3 switchable wings on defense and 3 guys on offense that like to shoot the 3 ball and cut to the rim, and they've done exactly that to start the year. That comes from your wings doing that. It also comes from Deandre Aiden not being a black hole in the middle. He'll pass out of a double team. He'll pass out of the post. Devin Booker likes to move off ball. Chris Paul obviously spreads the ball. He's done that his whole career. He's a fantastic passer, but he's not just someone that holds onto the ball and passes at last minute. No, he likes to get the ball moving. He continues to move the ball. He's always done that, and he's continuing to do that in Phoenix. And that's a reason why this Suns team is so dangerous, because often when you have 2 dynamic offensive players like Booker and Paul, you can fall into the trap that teams like the Clippers have fallen into at times, where it's just a stagnant offense waiting for those 2 to go to work, and then eventually, if nothing happens, you try to bail them out, which isn't the way to play the game, and it's not going to lead to a championship. On the other hand, the Suns like to move the ball. If they need to give it to Devin Booker or Chris Paul to get them a bucket, if they're not finding any other options, that's a pretty damn good option. Devin Booker's been bailing out the Suns for the first 5 years of his career, so he's more than capable of doing so, but I think the offense works more smoothly when he's not asked to do that consistently, and that's what I really like about this team. But I'm not done talking about this team. There's one player that I need to cover every time I talk about the Suns. I've done it the last couple of videos I've talked about them, dating back to the last video I made earlier this year before the bubble, and that's Mikael Bridges, one of my favorite players in the league. I said he was one of the best 3-and-D players in the league in that video. Well, if you don't know the name, if you haven't seen him play, he is one of the premier 3-and-D players in the league, and eventually I could see him being the second best player on this Suns team behind Devin Booker. That's no discredit to Chris Paul and how he's playing. It's more of praise for Mikael Bridges and how he's playing and how his offensive game is now catching up to his defensive game, which is already elite. Don't get it twisted. He's an elite defender. And kind of tying into Mikael Bridges and the 3-and-D theme with Jay Crowder, with Cam Johnson, all these guys that I've talked about. If you want to be a championship contender, you're going to have to beat the best teams in the league. It's that simple. And in the West, it's going to be the Lakers and Clippers that you're going to have to run through yet again, I expect. And one thing that I noticed in the Clippers series when they collapsed, yeah, there was a number of things, but the most notable thing, they took the ball out of Kawhi's hands at every possible opportunity. And that's something that the Nuggets did because they had the length in Jeremy Grant, Paul Millsap, those guys, active defenders that could then move off the double team and try to prevent a 3-point shot from happening. That's something I can see with Phoenix. If they do choose to double team Kawhi, which I think most teams will in the playoffs, then you get Mikael Bridges, you get Jay Crowder. Their length, their athleticism it gets in the vision of Kawhi. That's something that's really underrated with double teams. There's no point having two 5'2" guys getting in the way of Kawhi Leonard. He'll see over the double team. He'll shoot over the double team. But if you have those two athletic guys who can then move off and prevent open three-point shots from happening if Kawhi does see over the double team and make the right read, that's how the Nuggets won. And I think that's the blueprint for beating the Clippers. And I think if there's a team that have the necessary tools to do that against the Clippers, it's the Suns. In terms of the Lakers, that's a harder one because clearly no team has been able to beat the Lakers in a 7-game series as of yet, and double teaming LeBron doesn't work as well because he's one of the best passers of all time. Anthony Davis, if you can get the ball out of his hands, if you can be aggressive, they're just going to have to rely on their offense and their ability to have switchable guys like Deandre Aiden, Mikael Bridges, Jay Crowder, who are all capable of going up against LeBron and AD at any given time, and just hope that those guys can do a good enough job corralling those players. And the team defense that they play is also important against a team like the Lakers, who like to spread the ball and get open looks. The Suns are really good at switching, finding right rotations, and moving to shooters to prevent open threes. There's yet to be a clear blueprint to beating the Lakers, clearly. Play to their strengths, then who's to say they can't do it? Obviously, that's going to be a hard task. There's a reason everyone thinks they're going to win a championship, but they do have the assets to potentially cause the Lakers some troubles. I think when you look at this Phoenix Suns team, they just have all the pieces to be a genuine contender. They've got two closers in Devin Booker and Chris Paul. Chris Paul was the best closer in the entire NBA last year. We know what Devin Booker can do. They've got versatile wings that obviously come in handy, that are obviously crucially important in the playoffs when you come up against the likes of Kawhi and LeBron. They've also got a great head coach, and they've all bought into that system where they like to move the ball, obviously exemplified by Chris Paul and Devin Booker taking a combined 13 shots against the New Orleans Pelicans. You then got Deandre Aiden. Don't underestimate his defensive versatility and how important that can be, because you look at teams like the Nuggets and the Jazz who have come undone because of their center not being able to make the switches, not being able to step up in the pick and roll game. Aiden can do that. He can switch out onto the perimeter and he can bang inside. And that's a huge, huge thing when it comes to not being undone in the playoffs, because that's how a lot of teams expose defenses. They start at the big man and they try to draw them out and exploit them, something that probably won't happen to Aiden. And I think that's a huge thing for the Suns and their championship hopes. There's just a number of things about this team. Their bench unit as well. Cam Johnson, Cam Payne, and Dario Saric, Javon Carter, all of these guys, Langston Galloway, they run deep as well. The Phoenix Suns, do I have them as my championship favorites? No, I'm not crazy. But are they a championship contender? I think you'd be crazy to say they're not. I think you'd be crazy to say they're not one of the best teams in the league, and they don't have all the versatility and the necessary pieces to potentially cause an upset going deep into the playoffs. Anyways, have a good day. Have a good New Year. Catch you next time. Bye.